Hello and welcome to the Dream 20th edition, 20th anniversary edition, venue set in the Kingdom of Apples. Today's scene takes place at the county freehold. The not resident, but definitely place of work for a lion puka named Leon and his trusty knight, Sir Cararis. Charles, what are you up to today?
Well, I am currently on my way to meet up with Lejeune, as there was mention of his of a particular skill that might be useful in his upcoming meeting with Mara, and especially since things have been going slowly, piece by piece. It's been really hard to focus. Charles, or Cararis, I should say, is making his way to the county freehold in the hopes that he'll be able to meet up with Leon, and maybe, just maybe, they can at least work out on what this aid might be able to bring him in these upcoming nights. It's a little hard to think. And besides, it's also an art that he feigned when people had mentioned it. Feigned the fact that he had no idea. Well, feigned knowledge, I should say, in the fact that he had no idea generally what it is, because this is not something that, I mean, he knows the definition, he knows what it means, the magic of dreams, but isn't all their magic of dreams? What is it? What kind of art or magic or language is this? A language that had to be created here, because when you come from a place where all things are dreaming, you never needed a magic in order to go into them.
You do here. Sorry, did not mean to break there for a moment. I had to open a neuromancy. Leon is waiting out in the training fields. He looks exhausted, and those training, for the most part, are largely showing their levels of exhaustion as well. There are definitely a lot more wounds going on. Most of them fairly superficial because they're not only is the recipient tired, but also the person doling out the damage, with the exception of one young lady who seems to be rather on point today, bright eyed and bushy tailed. Your squire really seems to be handling herself very well. She she quickly disarms her sparring opponent before, like, giving a friendly wave and then a very respectful bow. But Leon, the person you're actually there to see, is not for once participating in the sparring. He's actually like sitting with his back against a tree, his eyes like lightly closed.
Your Excellency, he says as he bows, like, he doesn't sit down or anything as he gets there.
He opens one eye. Cararis. Sorry, I forgot we were meeting today. One moment. He slowly, like, pushes himself up the tree. I am so tired.
Many of us are, Your Excellency, although I'm quite impressed with Anye's particular vigor right now. He says he's taking a look at her, and he's like, he gave it at least a nice, respectful nod in her direction. At least acknowledging her before, giving on his one-tracked mind over towards Lejeune.
She seems to be the only person in the entire freehold who isn't dragging ass at the moment.
And Charles sort of like rubs his eyes. there have been as a there have been some who have been finding alternative methods to staving off these dreams, and I will say I have managed at least once or twice to be able to ward them off just through maybe the ebb of the flow of it. I managed to overcome it, but those were far and few between.
I've heard a couple of rumors about Brooklyn setting up something or another to aid in sleep or something along those lines.
What I've heard is that it's a very costly thing, and not something that can be sustained for very long.
Shall we go get some coffee? I think coffee might help. You can go to the kitchen.
Coffee might be a good idea.
And he finally sort of tilts himself away from the tree. I'm so glad I am not taking any visits from outsiders today. I am just barely keeping it together.
Have there been many outsiders coming in recently?
No, just the occasional, person with just the most minor of concerns for me to take care of. But other than that, business as usual.
Charles sort of nods at that. I can imagine they're not doing as well. They're doing much better than us either.
I imagine. All right. So he leads the way to the kitchen. He sits down, and Barry is fussing about in the kitchen with other boggans, and he scurries over to Leon. Coffee, strongest coffee you've got, please, Barry. Carraris for you.
I'll take what the Count's having.
And Barry gives sort of a very nervous but yes. Oh. And runs off to the kitchen. And after a while, he'll return with some cups of very, very dark, rich coffee and some scones and croissants and stuff. Leon looks at it. He's like, I didn't ask for any of this. As he puts a bite of croissant in his mouth and then sips coffee.
Charles takes a scone and he bites his bit and drinks his coffee, and then he sort of twists his neck a little bit from the potency of it. It's like, would it be rude to say that I've had actually stronger?
I don't think it's rude, but if you want to correct Barry, I can call that little shit in here. Says he bites the croissant again.
No. I honestly don't know how it happened, and I think this is appropriate enough. The last one, I'm actually surprised I managed to stay still.
Where? Please fill in the gaps of this story.
Remember, when I went with the councilwomen of Brooklyn into Taranar, Councilwoman Amber had brought her own thermos of coffee. I want to say it was coffee. It tasted like it, but I'm not quite sure exactly what was put into it.
He just kind of gives a low rumbling chuckle. I'm sure if you had asked her, you would have gotten anything but the answer you were looking for.
He just Charles sort of smiles and is like, well, that's part of the fun sometimes. But admittedly, these days, with minds needing to be as focused as they are, I'm much preferring trying to keep things as direct as possible.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about the other parts that were fun.
Most people do.
So he like looks around the room. Is like any remaining like kitchen staff like makes their way away from like the doorway proper. I believe we have some things to discuss. Before we get to mine, I think I'd love to hear about your dreams.
Well, let's talk about them, shall we? Harl sort of sits back. It always starts with me waking up. And it's as though everything I've lived up to here in this place, this gray, dull world, was just the dream, and I'm waking back up in Arcadia for the first time in a while. Such an interesting, fascinating little thing where a world where the colors are dull and meaningless, and just these concepts of ideas that I'd never considered before. Just these, unreal fantasies. That's what it seems when I wake up, because I'm back in Arcadia. I'm once again, and he also gives his own eyes around the room to make sure no one's listening. I'm once again Cararis, Keeper of the Diamond Word, and Dancer of the Crimson Field, Marquise of the Black Tome, and the Beast of the Sealed Chamber. I am once again a Duke of Arcadia, and I have woken up. And it is a wondrous day, as always. The third sun has risen. The crystal brook is babbling. And I get dressed and I make my way down the halls as those run around, and our little bright-eyed, bushy-tailed individual, as she once was in Arcadia, comes along my path, and she trips, and she shatters apart like porcelain. So I tell her to put herself back together, and she does. Because once again, my words, what I say happens. My words once again shape the landscape. So she puts herself back together, and she makes her way away from me, and I open a window to gaze out across the land, and I see see my guards bringing things that I had never seen before, things that I didn't recognize, these things, this corruption. And I find myself in my throne room. And they've brought them before me, and I'm sure you remember Sven from my story. He's taken the position of being a captain in one of my guards. Made sense in the dream. He wasn't really anyone. He wasn't really anyone in that sort of ranking. But I think I see where the symbology of it was going. regardless, he announces that these are individuals, these corrupted beings have been found upon my lands and trying to pollute them. And each of them have their own crimes. And I'm to and they have brought me to render judgment, and they have been brought to me so that I may render judgment upon their sins. So they bring the first one. And I should mention, at the time when they come up to me, I don't recognize one of them. I don't recognize a single one of them. It's not until later do I remember who they were. But the one they bring me is tall. He's strong. He looks like a troll should be, but there's something wrong about him, something off. That corruption I'm speaking of, something that makes him so much duller, so much like pollution and the purity that is Arcadia. And it's told to me that this is a man who uses words and to inspire, to raise people up. And yet, when things get too harsh or rough, he pulls out his sword and cuts down the opposition.
Gee, who could that be?
Yes, like I said, I don't remember him in the dream. It's not too hard to put two and two together. But I ask him specifically why he does this. Why, when his words are powerful enough, that he doesn't use a sword to cut down his opponents, to cut down his opposition when others don't agree or raise to challenge him. His answer was liberty. So I liberated his spirit from his body. The next comes up, and it's a red cap, or as it should be a red cap. And it's one who looks probably part of that corruption, but looks a little more gorgeous than most would be. But her smile is wide and stuff. And it's told to me this is someone whose words mean nothing, who say these things in random bouts, but they don't mean anything by it. They can't even keep a promise. They can't even keep their word. So I begin my inquiry into why do they throw their words around so needlessly and yet mean nothing by them. Their words are so empty. She tells me to go fuck myself. I tell her to go fuck herself. And she does for hours until she's dead.
Leon looks a little unsettled by this. Oops.
Honestly, I will say it's probably one of the more satisfactory parts of the dream, Misaro says, and he's actually quite honest about that one. But a third is brought up, and it's someone, Kith I don't even recognize in the dream, but I recognize what it is now. It's this individual who works behind the shadows. She slinks between them and moves things about, keeps secrets. So when I ask her for her reasons why she does these things, she doesn't answer. And so I make her as much a shadow as she likes to be a part of them. And all that's left of her is her skin. And then the fourth one comes up. And this one, they tell me, speaks a word that doesn't make sense, doesn't rhyme with the universe, so to speak. And so I demand to hear the word, because I am the keeper of the diamond word. I know the meaning of all words. And in the dream, the word doesn't make any sense. But the word is friend. And I become irate. Because this is a meaningless word. What is friendship in the dream? After, well, I know now what it means. But in the dream, I'm back to my old self before I was enlightened to the full depths and meanings of what friendship really was. And then there's a voice in my head. And it wasn't until my trip to Taranar and I speaking with the councilwomen that I know whose voice that is in my head when it eggs me on. When it says, "Such a heartless little creature, isn't it?" That's Mara speaking right there. Mara trying to egg me on to name this creature Heartless. Every time in the dream, though, I'm a little disturbed. Maybe I was catching on to it early on already. Maybe that's what gives me a little bit of an advantage, but I never got fully a grasp of it. Now that I know that's my key point. That's where I need to try and make the connection. Well, the dream's not over, of course. I shed a single tear before I hear those words when I hear the word friendship. And I'm about to actually render my judgment upon this creature that would dare call me friend. But I don't do it. Some part of me is a little too disturbed, too offset by this sensation. So I order them all into the dungeons. I'll deal with them later. I was entertaining thoughts of what I could do with them later. But Sven tells me there's one they can't put in the dungeons. This one's too... this one needs to be dealt with immediately. And I ask why. And it was said I was best I see for myself. And they bring forward a man. A human man. Graying at the temples. Even though he is only in his early... even though he's only like barely into his late 30s. He stands there bound. And I don't quite understand why this thing, this stain on Arcadia, is so much trouble. It's almost like he's not even real. He's like a pale shadow. But I'm told by Sven, it's because he is me. Ah, yes, it's Charles. And I'm going to render judgment, and it's like this wound in reality, and then I feel cuts. Old cuts, he says, as he sort of rubs his palm upon our hands, something that connects us. And then he embraces me, and I am corrupted. No matter how much I tell Sven to help, Sven doesn't help. As much as I try to command the world, my power saps away from me as I become Cararis and Charles. And then I remember everything. I know exactly who I was killing. I know exactly who that was who called me friend. I remember my promises. And I've just thrown her into a dungeon. So I run down to that dungeon. Down into it. Stumbling. So weak, so frail, so fragile as I'm trying to find her to save her from what I had done. And as I go down there, I see my acolytes practicing their words that burn, their words that cut and slice so deep. But as I reach finally to her. Our little porcelain squire is there, and she says the words I couldn't bring myself to say. And I collapse, unable to breathe, unable to feel the newfound blood rushing into flowing through my veins, feeling it frozen within me. Or I'd broken my promises.
Why heartless?
I don't know. That's the one thing I never figured out.
He seems a little perplexed and a little disturbed. Like at some point, he brought his cup of coffee up to drink from it, but it's hasn't been sipped from in quite a while. Just sort of that trying not to have the look of horror across his face.
What?
Well, it's certainly an interestingly aggressive dream. So you rendered judgment on the citizens of my county. It's very interesting. My own dream is far, far less interesting, I think. But you don't need to know about my dreams. I just need to know about yours. Do you plan on talking to Mara, you said, on Friday?
Mm-hmm. Friday the 13th. I feel there should be enough of a bad juju resonance to attract her attention a bit more, at least entice her into my trap, so to speak.
Well, if you give me a heads up, say about a bad day, it takes about an hour to get within range of you, but I'm pretty sure we have established some sort of relationship between the two of us now that I don't need to hike all the way to your apartment. But if you do give me a heads up, I can leave some clues for you in your dream.
That's through this he keeps his words down, or neuromancy, is it?
Yes. It's a nice little trick I learned back when I was still a cub. Back when the world is still a very terrifying place when you're small. Sometimes you need to find a opportunistic place to hide. Later on, you get to learn about things that make people nervous. A little peek into their inner psyche. People have some fucked up dreams. Of course, with the current dream climate, I haven't been making much use of it. And honestly, with what you're telling me, I don't think I'm going to let myself be seen in person by you. That just seems as though I'm asking for trouble.
Probably. Well, that depends on when you make your appearance. Is it before or after I'm Charles? But
You sound like you're pretty busy. And as far as after you're Charles, you said your key point is before that?
yes.
So it seems as though if I were to come across you after you're Charles, you've missed your window. But I think I can leave you a few clues. Something that lets you remember that you're on the job.
Every little bit helps, like little dominoes. I'll admit I'm very largely ignorant of this particular
Craft,
bit of
magic, sorcery.
everything but arts, please.
Sure. I suppose I could give you a brief tutelage just to get you started. Of course, you know the rules of secrecy still remain. I don't like the general populace keeping tally of my capabilities.
Nor I. Rather, I think they think I'm far more powerful than I actually am these days.
Well, yawns. I suppose that could work in your advantage as long as they aren't expecting you to save their asses.
True. Then again, I think they're wise enough now with what happened at the Ranters and what I am capable of. Leads at least enough of a factor. Now, I would appreciate that tutelage, though, especially with the tracking down with those dark trod cults. As I said, there was definitely a Dreamweaver within that spell. Whatever they did to puppet them. And having at least a basic idea of how the magic works would aid me greatly.
Well, I can show you what I do to set up. I mean, I could use a nap anyways. He says as he just kind of gives like that long like cat stretch. Probably gets a little too close to your face at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I wouldn't. Everyone's craft is their own unique method, anyway. But I would like to see at least the basics. I will say one thing, though. I don't think your dream would be uninteresting for me. As we've seen, some people will often fall into their nightmares a little too deeply. What with my squire being an example. And I found myself, not during this bout, but almost a year back, there was also another plague of nightmares. Nothing quite like this, but I found myself lost in it. I didn't realize what was real until it was too late. At the very least, you know what to look for if I'm trapped in that dream. It'd probably be helpful if I knew how to do this, what to do, what to look for in you in case the worst should happen. I'd prefer it didn't, but given the nature of these things and the fact that I'm aiming for not tonight but days away, You never know what could happen in the midterm.
You should ask your squire what her secret is. Ugh. But since you are keeping things to yourself, I'm in love with this woman. She's another lion creature. She's not a puka. She doesn't have to lie. She's just very lion-esque. She's beautiful. Just dark black hair that reaches all the way down to the backs of her legs, and eyes that put emeralds to shame. And I'm smitten with her. And I begin to go deaf to all except for her voice. All but her command. And I begin to lose myself as a leader. But I'm so satisfied just being in her presence. I don't seem to really catch on to what's going on. But then she starts giving me orders, each with the promise that it will make me a greater leader. Do this, and you will be the greatest that ever lived. And it takes me a long time to get through that voice, to sort of make myself aware of what I'm doing in my surroundings. And when I awaken, I'm playing the fiddle and New York is burning.
You asked me why I was egged to make her heartless. I don't know why, but that does bring an interesting point of why she would speak that point at that point very specifically. Question I think we all have to ask ourselves is, when does she speak to us directly and what does it mean? I'm sure there's points in that dream where it's not her, not Mara saying something to you. But I'm sure there's one order, one command, one thing in particular that is. And that might be the key of what your dreams are trying to tell you. And that's something I'll have to analyze with my own as well.
Perhaps. I can't say that I've picked up on any different voices, but maybe now that I know to listen. It's very unsettling. I mean, as it is, I don't listen to anybody's requests or concerns, as you know.
Of course not. This is
monarchy. Why the hell would I have to keep anybody happy, right?
I mean, it was working so well early before you got here.
Of course. That's why the commoners have been so loyal.
Well, before we lose too much focus, perhaps you can at least walk me through the beginnings of this craft.
Well, it all has to do with sleep. You're breaking into literal dreams, after all. And you have to be asleep to do it, or sort of prepping to be asleep to do it. Sort of a, I don't know, like some people do the now I lay me down to sleep kind of thing. Some people do stranger things. He says as he just kind of like looks like off in the distance at some shit he's probably seen.
I've seen some shit, man.
But I like to fall back on more appropriate for me sort of actions. And he's like, he stands up. He's like, here, follow me. And he'll, he starts heading out. And he heads past like various rooms, like the office and stuff like that. And he goes to like a sleeping chambers. And before you like can walk in, he's like, one moment, and he like closes the door, and like a lion opens it again. And he starts like moving things around in the room, like to make a sleeping place on the floor. And he does like he spins around like 3 times to find a comfortable position. He does a stretch, and he stands up, walks again 3 times, does the stretch, walks around 3 times, does the stretch, big yawn, and then you get the distinct feeling of like a cantrip being cast. And Lord knows whose dream he has decided to walk in. But you see him sort of like reacting appropriately. And like maybe a kick of the feet or just kind of a wince. And he like wakes up. As I said, with the current landscape, this is not exactly a nice time to go wandering around in dreams.
And Charles is looking at this. He's been watching the ritual, and he's feeling the magic, come through. And it's a little hard to focus, but this is like the one thing he is focusing on, as he's starting to see it. He's starting to see. He can almost hear it too. The way that Lejean spins 3 times, and when he yawns, he can almost hear it like cries. No, not cries. Something like a echo or a whisper. Something ephemeral. Words of some kind coming towards him, a language. Something so familiar, so close that he could grasp it. So far away at the same time. But he knows some words. He can hear them echoing in his brain, and he knows if he just focuses, Maybe if he focuses a bit more, he learns more of these words, perhaps he can start the beginning of this. Well, isn't this interesting? And it's almost like he's lost in his own thought, as though he's listening to like music that's not there, even though Li Chan's like, just like a landscape's not good. It's like he's like listening to the ambient echoes of what remains of the magic of the cantrip. Even though it's something so brand new, it still speaks with a language so old. I think I'm beginning to see at least the very first steps, the very first sentences, or at least the first words. I see how this is going to work. I see. Thank you, Your Excellency. I will definitely let you know at least an hour before I prepare to lay me down to sleep.
He nods. He has something in his hand. He doesn't really make much of a statement about it, but he just sort of like throws it on top of like a dresser, like, well, tosses it because it's a paw, but it's still clutched in that like between the toes and whatever.
Yeah.
He tosses it there and he gives a shake of his head, sort of pads to a closet, steps out as Leon a moment later. And I know it's not much, but it's very basic bunks. If you want to roll perception, something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Greymare or Kenning, something.
Yeah. Greymare, probably.
Yeah,
or Kenning.
Either way, it's a 5 dice roll for me.
Yeah.
At diff 8, yay! Let's see how this goes. I don't get shit.
Really? Which one?
I got 0 successes. I mean, extra 1.
You want to try again at diff 9?
Sure, why not? Let's see if Charles can rock a diff 9. Oh, that was 6 that was 6 dice. Oh well. I'll just remove the 9. Just say 1 success. Why not? Whatever.
Just the very basic. It was much more than a basic cantrip's worth of glamour.
Yeah.
Because level 1, you disappear.
What?
Yeah, you hide in someone's dream at the very basics. And whatever he may have put down might be a clue as to how significant it was, or rather what he was doing. But that would require, perception or something. Perception, alertness, maybe.
Yeah, that might. Yeah, you know what? Fine. Let's keep this train going. Remember, it's 5 dice, Michael. Jesus Christ. Symbolism. What's the symbolism here? 2 successes.
2 successes. If you casually casting a glance over at what is on the nightstand, you see what looks to be a very, very tattered butterfly wing made out of stained glass.
And Charles is definitely looking at that for just a brief moment. There's a few Like, his brain's moving a bit slow because, he's tired.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few clicks here and there of who it might connect to.
What?
Hmm.
Who is this mystery person?
Yeah. Who else has stained glass butterfly wings? I mean, what?
But yes, that is what you see. It is obviously chimerical, by the way. It's like if it were to go out into the gray world, it probably would not last for very long. Yeah.
Well, Charles just sort of smiles. It's not like a friendly, but it's not like, malicious smile as he's looking at this thing. It's like, well, I'm glad that you will be at least giving me some clues for what to look out for. Hope I don't see you in my dreams.
I can't see how that would be anything but a good time.
I don't know. I think it's a roaring party already.
He kind of does a sort of subtle glance to the wing. These dreams need to stop. Or at least the throat grabbing severity of them needs to be diminished in some way.
As it's been determined, it's actually ill-advised if we stop them forever. They are required. Nightmares are dreams too, and they deserve to exist even if they are uncomfortable.
Of course, they were fighting before, if I understand what information's been relayed to me so far, and we weren't having constant nightmares.
As I said, also, I believe that the key to this is either finding out what made Mara stronger than Baku in the past, that tipped the scales, or we recreate what was done before to strengthen Baku back to a stronger state.
Whichever path you decide to take, sooner rather than later.
I hope once I'm done with my conversation with Mara on the 13th, I'll have a clearer idea of what path might be better.
Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you again, Your Excellency. I'll let you get back to rest.
I should go back out to the training field to make sure your squire isn't murdering my men.
Much as I am not one for watching the violence, I wouldn't mind. I think I'll take an exception and take a bit of an observation myself.
Please join me. He'll lead back to the fields where there are more like superficial injuries on the men, as like they people are very reluctant to spar Anye at this point. Yes, her eyes are bright, and there are no bags underneath them, and she's got a very vibrant appearance at the moment. If you want to roll perception kenning, you can.
Yes, I would. And I'll spend a willpower on that, actually.
All right.
2 successes thanks to that.
Mm. She seems to be radiating a lot more glamour than you've ever seen her radiate.
It's not similar to something I was once doing.
No. This is different. There's like there's also a hint of like wildness to her eyes. Not wild like a puka is wild. Wild like Arcadia.
Tapped into something a bit raw, I think.
A sparring partner finally mans up and is ready to spar with her. It's one that she's expressed having problems with before. It's a little mouthy.
How'd he end up here? I'm just kidding, but that's another one. They're always mouthy. God damn these people.
People tend to be mouthy with her because she's very opinionated. That's what happens. As they begin to fight, you notice a cantrip go off without a bunk. As he just sort of like starts moving more slowly. His strikes definitely seem stronger, but he's moving so much slower than Anye that she's actually begun to sort of flank him most of the time. She's staying behind him with her attacks.
Yeah, he's watching her intently on this because she's cast a spell without a bunk very like effortlessly. And I mean, there wasn't even a bunk. There wasn't even like the slightest moment of a murmur of her like trying to utter her own or true name or even another true name or anything along those lines. He's just watching.
Roll perception alertness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be a jerk for this one just because it is a very minute detail. It's gonna be difficulty 10.
It's fine. See if Charles can pull it off. He got 1 success.
Does her hair seem longer? Like several inches longer than the last time you saw it?
Now, I'm not a master of Chronos or anything.
Neither is she.
Neither is she. Who's giving her borrowed time?
See, it would be accelerated time.
Yeah. That's going to come down with a hard crash.
Now, there's... It's a... In your roll, it wasn't cantrip, or it wasn't arts glamour. It was raw.
Yeah, this is... Charles is like, it's really hard to fucking think these days. And there's a brief moment of him going like, oh, okay, I gotta stumble through this. That's the point of living, I guess. Thanks, Dice.
You could roll me a wits enigmas if you'd like.
Wits enigmas? I can do. Let me take a look at my enigmas real fast. It's been a while. I know it's one of my higher ones, and I haven't gotten the chance to use it in a while. Oh, okay. Keep going with my 5 dice.
Ooh.
Still diff 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 3 successes.
Holy crap. Okay. As you're sort of there trying to piece together the puzzle of what the hell is going on with your squire, it finally starts to dawn on you. This raw glamour, this sort of bringing her fey beauty up, like the glowing of it all, the fact that it seems stronger, the fact that she seems to be casting magic almost effortlessly, and the fact that she seems to have had a significant amount of time pass in a very short amount of time since you last saw her. She's been in the dreaming long enough, at least from her perspective, for her hair to grow several inches. Not centimeters, inches.
There's a few taps on the side of his cheek as he thinks about this. And he notes that he's not going to discuss it now, but it's going to be a discussion at some point later down the road here, because if she's wandering off onto the dreaming on her own, well, that puts him in the awkward position. What if she gets hurt? How can he be there to protect her and do his purpose if she's off doing something dangerous? And at the same time, why take such a great risk? So for now, he sits back and he continues to watch this continue on. But he's not really watching the fight, the battles. No, he's watching her, watching this wild echo of a thing she once was. And he thinks for a moment. Closes his eyes. You know, he says as he's saying to Lijon, I had been looking to try and see if I could find her a mentor, one who could teach her the art of the blade better, and it concerned me with her previous accolades that she was dealing with individuals who were to her skill level, or quite frankly lacking in skill level. We don't learn unless we are challenged. And of course, given our current states these days, it's a little hard to make sure that everyone's on an equal playing field when you're fresh.
Hmm. Should I call her off the field?
Charles shakes his head. No. But I want her to have a challenge. I want her to grow. If you would permit me, I might be able to work something with one of the knights here for just a moment.
By all means, she's your squire.
Mm. And Kararis gets up and he doesn't enter the field, but he gets up there as though he's prepared to to speak. But he waits for the bout to end.
The one Anya is currently having, or the one your
Yeah, he's
target?
waiting. He's the one that Anya is currently having. He's waiting for that bout to end.
All right. It ends with her like putting her foot to the small of her opponent's back and just kicking him face down. He is having a really hard time picking himself up.
Mm.
She lets him linger in the dirt for a little longer than a nicer person would.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually she puts her hand out to help him up and releases the magic she put on him. He gets up like a little too fast all of a sudden. And she and him head off the field.
And Charles makes his approach. That was well fought, Anya.
Thank you, my lord.
And he's taking a good look at her and he goes, well rested as well, I see.
During this time, we must find ways to make ourselves strong so that we may keep up with our duties.
Mm. Indeed we must, he says as he's looking at her. He's like, his own eyes are like, even for marble, a little bagged and stuff like that. Perhaps we'll have a discussion about what path you've taken here in the future. I'm quite interested to hear the story. I'm sure it's quite a tale. However, I must say that your skill on the field has actually proven to be quite invigorating. However, I am concerned.
Oh?
Not
something with... I do displease?
No, nothing you've done to displease me. I'm actually glad to see you at full capacity, as it were. He says, I'm more concerned about the fact that I believe we had a discussion a while back about the fact that I was hoping that we would be able to get you to a point where we would have someone to challenge you and to help you grow in your capacity as far as a swordswoman. Unfortunately, with the way most of these individuals are, he says as he looks at them, I have to say most of them are going to be very lacking. How are you feeling?
Like I could take on the world, Lord.
Well, I'm not going to have you take on the world, but I'm going to have you take on your equal.
And she kind of looks over at the various other fighters who are rubbing down their muscles and stuff and putting on poultices on bruises and stuff. Are you bringing someone in?
Charles sort of looks at one of them who doesn't is the least knocked around at the moment. No. I think I'm just going to make I have one to challenge you. Anya, if I may, could you give me just a small lock of your hair? Just a small amount. That's it. And I promise you I will return it to you once the bout is over.
She nods and she takes her sword and cuts a small lock of hair from her ponytail.
Thank you, Anya, he says as he takes it. I'll be back with your equal, he says as he walks away and heads towards this this young woman. I don't know what she is. She doesn't have to be a she or
knocker.
anything. A knocker, a young knocker. You there? What's your name?
Hey, Chief. They they call me Rowdy Jill. One moment. She's just like pulling off like some dented armor, and she's just like, and she like screams at it, and it kind of buckles outward, and she puts it back on. What can I do for you?
Have you had a bout with my squire Anya Ni Aileel over there? He says as he sort of gives a nod over in her direction.
She gives her a glance, and she like points to another dent on her armor. It's like, yes, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Sir Cararis, keeper of the diamond word.
She's the one who put this dent here. Sir Cararis, keeper of the diamond word.
Well, he says as he's twirling the hair between his fingers, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to see your own skills increase and to give my squire a much-needed challenge.
You want me to fight her again?
He nods. I have been given permission by her to find her a champion that I will make her equal, and I am choosing you.
I'll admit she's a lot tougher today than she has been since I've met her. Usually it's just a couple of minutes that she's up against me, but whew.
And he's slowly braiding a little bit of the hair into this sort of like, it's like a mini sort of braid. He's like twisting it between his fingers here. Yes, and while I am glad to see that she is full of verve and vigor, especially in these harsh times, it's still important for one to be challenged. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, of course, that's why we're out here.
Exactly. And I don't see much of a challenge in facing off the entire squad by yourself when all of us are suffering from lack of rest. So, he says, as he finishes his braid here, as he holds this up, I am going to balance the scales between you and her. If you agree to face her again.
Well, yeah, face her all day long as long as she isn't. She points to the person who was just fighting Anya, and he's a rather larger, he's a larger opponent. He was the satyr from last time. He's just kind of like moping a bit and like, no, I'm fine. There's nothing. No, I'm fine. As he like tries to put on the tough guy act.
Well, and he gets down on one knee here. Is it? If you could please extend out your right hand.
She gives him like a sus look and like holds out her right hand.
Yeah, and he takes it very gently and he starts to around the ring finger. He starts to tie the braided bit of hair. You will give this back to me once the bout is over, he says, and he Now, as he works, now tell me, what about her, when you've seen her fighting this day, have you admired?
She has this way of slowing people down or speeding herself up that's real neat. But I think that's something she's tapping into magic like. She's she's pretty solid with her and she'll describe some sword technique that I don't know.
Okay. Charles nods as he's still slowly working the braid into this sort of like a first a loop, then the second loop, and he's working on the third one. Now tell me her flaws. What do you see lacking that she could improve on?
Oh, she's very impatient and just she's got a very short temper. I've noticed that on normal days, I mean, we all kind of talk shit with each other out here. I mean, it's a sort of battlefield humor, you know. We can rib each other, but nobody else can. She doesn't really seem to get into the camaraderie all that much.
Charles finishes the loop on the third loop. Rowdy Jill. For a brief moment, this next bout, you're not going to be Rowdy Jill. You're not going to fight like Rowdy Jill. You are going to be Anye's equal. And that was my entire bunking for nicknaming her Rowdy Jill Anye's equal. So let's see how that goes.
Okay, I'll give that a 3.
Okay, so...
And you're in a freehold, so that's 4.
Nightmares.
If you want to take nightmare dice, I will lower it even further.
Well, let's see here. So difficulty's at 10 because difficulty was originally 10. We're at 6 technically, actually.
Yep.
I only need this for one scene, and this is Faye, and I've connected. So, and I have, I'm rolling 8 dice on this. So, yay. See how this goes. Oh my God. Jesus Christ, Charles.
What did you do, Charles?
It was 7 successes, but it's not lasting for this goddamn year. He'll end it after this bout, but Jesus. So extra, Charles.
Jesus.
I'll make sure I spend my willpower and glamour by the end of the scene, but anyway.
Well, which naming are you doing? Because if you're doing it as... Huh?
It was naming 2. It was just naming her as her equal.
I was going to say, if you do let's see, what was 3? It was...
3's Saining.
4 is the runic one. If you want to like bump up her stats, you can do that, and you can apply those successes to the stats you're bumping up, and then the duration, just leave it for the scene.
Yep, that's true. But it's a matter of balancing out what's her equal. Yeah. And that's what it's all narrative at that point. That's why I was doing 2 at that point. So.
Okay.
You're Anye's equal.
And she gives a very respectful nod and then bow. And then strides out to Anye. And since this is a battle between equals, I will do my best to describe it. As they begin, it's a mad clash of parries and blocks, like almost as if they are within the same mindset. And as far as their skill goes, at some points it seems as though Anye is gaining the upper hand. She's got this very short temper, and she's kicking at Rowdy Jill when she gets frustrated because she doesn't have the clear advantage anymore. But Jill always recovers. Jill, did you put in like the flaws and stuff as well with her? Okay.
I made her equal. Yeah. She's equal in every way.
So as Jill's watching her temper sort of flail up. When Anya starts getting the upper hand again, Jill gets angry, and she'll sort of like retaliate with, even though they're equals, they're different. Mm-hmm. She is not Anya, but she is her equal, and so she brings in this sort of skill of her own kith, while Anya is bringing in her arts to match. So Anya attempts to make Jill heavier, but Jill retaliates by using that weight against Anya and just like sort of lays on her. And this keeps going. And Anya, having been fighting, having fought all day in a rotation, is just slightly more tired than her equal was.
Then again, her equal is also not as fresh and bushy-tailed either.
Her equal is not going for a coup de grace here. Mm-hmm. While Anya is tired, and yes, the equal is not fresh-faced, they seem to be growing tired of this struggle where they can't gain the upper hand on each other. And eventually, the two just both sit down at the same time and begin to talk and cry and hug each other.
And Charles is watching this because it's at this point where they're talking, crying, and hugging each other. It's actually something that's he's doing his best not to like overhear, get between them, but he's like definitely watching this because this is still very important.
They actually stay there for a good couple of minutes discussing something, and they actually help each other up. Not one stands and the other pulls the other up, but they sort of lean on each other for strength. Their mutual exhaustion sort of dwindling as they support each other. And Rowdy Jill leads Anya back towards her rarest keeper of the diamond word, and she gives like a respectful bow, which brings Anya down into the bow as well. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we're done fighting for the day. It's been a real long day.
I'm sure it has. Thank you, Rowdy Jill. May I please have Anya's hair back?
And she nods, of course. Here you go.
That Charles takes it, and with that, the magic ends. And he hands the makeshift ring to Anya. But he doesn't let go, but he's holding it out to her for the moment. Tell me about what happened.
She was too tough for me to beat. She seemed to know what I was going to do before I did it. But, I don't know, once we were both too tired to fight, it just seemed absurd to keep going on.
And why is that?
What were we going to achieve except injury? And neither of us actually wanted to hurt the other.
So you talked?
Yes, my lord.
Very good. There's also another thing I should mention. When I said I was going to find someone who was your equal, I meant it. I made her your equal. All the best and worst of you.
She nods.
And he holds up the hair ring to her, and he says, "We challenge ourselves every day to become better than who we were yesterday. You've seen yourself now. Where you take that with you is up to you. But now that you know yourself better," says as he puts the ring back in her hands and closes it, puts the hair ring into her hand and he closes it. "I think we'll start seeing some growth."
Yes, my lord. And she gives a respectful bow and then, is there anything that you need from me?
And he shakes his, he sort of pauses and he goes, "Actually, there's something I'll need from you. Not today. Friday the 13th, I'm going to need your help with something."
Of course, my lord. It's my duty as your squire.
It's my duty to make sure that you are protected and safe, and that you grow.
Thank you.
And he smiles that fang diamond smile. "Now go get some rest, Anye. And I do mean it. I do want to hear the story about your your new look."
She looks a little confused when he says new look. What do you mean?
He just smiles. "We'll talk about it later."
Yes, my lord. And she heads off in a direction that is not the sleeping quarters or barracks.
Mm.
She does leave.
Mm. He folds his arms as he's watching wherever she's going to go. They'll talk about it later. Enough lessons for one day. Right now, he's got to focus on. What was he trying to focus on? Oh, right. Mara. With a weary sigh, he starts to make his way out.
And unless you have anything else you want to accomplish, this is where we will end our scene. Thank you, players, for playing. Thank you, watchers, for watching. And we'll see you next time.